Imagine this. You've spent years building a short-term rental business. You've optimized listings, refined pricing, built a brand. Then, overnight, the rules change. Hotels appear in search results, cancellation policies loosen, algorithms shift, and suddenly, you're competing in a marketplace that doesn't feel designed for you anymore. Today, on The Check-In, we're talking to an operator who's living this in real time and asking what Airbnb's latest changes actually mean for those on the ground. Welcome back to The Check-In.
Morning, Sarah.
Good morning, Leo. How's it going, buddy?
I'm very well, my friend. We're excited about this one. We gotta waste no time in getting our friend Steve in here. So today we're going to speak to Steve Taggert of MyGetaways to hear about the experiences on the ground with all of the changes that have been taking place recently. So yeah, without further ado, welcome Steve. Hi, Steve. How are you?
I'm very well, Leo. Thank you for asking. Yeah, very good.
Nice to see you, neighbour. For anyone who doesn't know, Steve and I are in the same town, and it's strange actually because normally we meet face to face. I've actually recorded an episode of our podcast, Sarah, sat in Steve's chair there. I think is that right?
It's a nice looking chair.
Good, indeed. Right next to the seafront in Hove. Indeed.
Yeah. Lovely. Well, look, Steve, thanks for joining us today. We have got a lot to unpack. We've talked recently on the show about the Airbnb changes. What we want to do today is look at how those changes are actually affecting people working in the industry, working in the field. You are the biggest property manager in one of UK's most popular weekend tourist destinations. So like very much a sort of place that we should be championing and supporting, right? The out of London tourism and more than that, Brighton's internationally renowned. So look, we're really interested to hear your story. Before we get into it, Steve, tell us a little bit about MyGetaways, how you started it and what you've grown it to.
So I started MyGetaways just over 10 years ago. I'm a bit of a technology geek, so I saw the way property managers at that time were operating, and I thought we could build our own software, and I thought I'd build my own property management system in 6 months and systemize the way we communicate with guests and with hosts and with owners. And here I am 10 years later, still building it and still building our technology. But we've built to a reasonable size business now. We just look after just over 100 properties across Sussex, but mainly in Brighton and Hove, being the biggest city in Sussex. And we've been pretty successful in what we've done. Although times at the moment are challenging for the whole sector with a wave of regulation coming our way, tax changes, some squeezes on average daily rates. But we're still here, we're still going strong and still growing, but in a organic fashion.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenging market, isn't it? And whenever I talk to you know, it's Brighton's it's not even a bellwether for the UK. Brighton is always further ahead than the UK because there's so much London money sloshing around for people coming down. So it's interesting to hear about the struggles in the UK market. Before we go in to talk about that, and Sarah will ask you a couple of questions. For our American cousins who are going to love this, whose hunting lodge or country retreat do you have on the books? Come on, it's someone, an old famous prime minister, isn't it? Come on.
It is, yeah. So 6 months ago, we took on Winston Churchill's country retreat. It's no longer in the Churchill family, but yes, he apparently used to go there to get away from wartime London, and his family subsequently, generations after that, used it for many years. I believe it's not been in family's hands for 20 or 30 years, but you can really see how the other half lived back in wartime England with Art Deco swimming pools and, fishing, as the current owners call it, a small pond. It's the size of a normal fishing lake and acres of woodland, and it really is beautiful. It's about 15 miles outside Brighton in the beautiful Sussex countryside. Yeah, really amazing. We've got some fantastic properties, but that's definitely one of the ones that really blew our socks off when we saw it.
That's incredible. I would love to stay there. Although I'm in between of either I would love it or maybe I would find it a bit creepy if it's full of hunting gear and stuff like that. I don't know. Let's see. Maybe I hope there's no ghosts, Steve. Can you confirm?
It's really not now. The current owners have been super sympathetic to it, and it's just a beautiful home. If you want to get away from the madness of urban life, really is a wow factor of living. And as you know, in England, we don't have a lot of space. We just don't. We don't have vast spaces of farmlands and retreats, and so to have something like that so close to a real urban centre is pretty amazing. It's a beautiful part of the country, it really is. Sussex is, as you'd imagine, I'm going to say, but Sussex is one of my favourite places in the whole country. So I live here.
I can imagine so. Listen, Steve, thanks so much for joining us today. I'd love to kind of dive in and get a bit of sort of a great segue after we just talked about one of your properties with a lot of historicity. But I'd love to talk about how you viewed short term rentals when you first got into the biz and how that has changed with the use of OTAs, and in particular with some of the recent changes being brought down the pipeline from Airbnb in particular.
So I kind of I fell into it like a lot of people do. I actually came from in my history. I was before I started going deaf was a DJ and I made music as well for quite some time. Not very well. I did much better as a DJ than making music, but that's the where the kind of geeky side came. And I owned me and my partner owned a small apartment in kind of downtown Brighton. And, we decided to try doing holiday lets, as it was known then. It was a perfect holiday home, really close to the city centre. And in them days, we were still using, Owners Direct and those kind of platforms where you paid a subscription model. And there wasn't really OTAs that you could advertise on easily accessible. And then along came Airbnb and kind of made that process a whole lot easier, and and that market grew. Holiday homes have always been in the UK. This is not a new phenomena. This is something that has been happening in holiday hotspots for generations, since the 40s and 50s. And I talked about Winston Churchill building his own country retreat. These properties have been going for a long time. People have always come to the coastal areas to find some time to relax, breathe in the sea air. And in Brighton, we're lucky to have Prince Regent, who became King George. And some of you may know the madness of King George. And the reason King George went mad is he got allegedly got syphilis from somebody in Brighton while on his holidays. And then he built this beautiful Brighton pavilion, which is effectively looks like the Taj Mahal. It's the madness of King George. Before he was King George, was Prince Regent, was banished to Brighton, to where all the naughty people lived. And built this wonderful, I don't think it was a home, it was more like, he did live there, but it's more like a sign of the craziness that Brighton is. And to this day, Brighton has always attracted, people that kind of look for alternative ways to live.
Yeah, and I think it's a city that's really made for the Airbnb revolution that was happening at their side, right? The idea that for a lot of people, their first experience of home sharing was not Owners Direct. It was not sort of finding something in a brochure. It was not finding an article in a magazine. It was like this idea that, oh, look, I can go and travel. I can go and have a house outside of a big city in a little place. So I think it's fair to say that, and again, you can disagree with this, that in the initial relationship with Airbnb, somewhere like Brighton hugely benefited from that tech-enabled home sharing app becoming a household name.
Fantastically so. It really did help people find an alternative way to stay. If you think, I've got two teenage children now. The thought of me, and hotels really have their place in our market, in the overall accommodation mix. But for me to stay in a hotel room with my two teenage children is not a holiday. That's hell. And, Airbnb opened up a new way of people being able to stay with, in apartments or in houses with gardens and, close to the sea and parking and all the things you have home from home. That's actually how it worked so well in the beginning, and actually, allowed a lot of people to access technology they wouldn't ordinarily be able to get anywhere near. And that market exploded.
What do you think? What do you think was typical from an expectation and a profile perspective to find in an Airbnb guest that was coming to Brighton when it first started to grow in popularity?
My initial thoughts were guests were so glad and so happy to see homely touches, and find tea bags or coffee kind of left out for them, and they could put their feet up in front of a TV in a living room and sleep in a different space. They used to leave incredibly lovely notes for hosts to say thank you so much. We had an amazing stay. It was a two-way interaction between hosts and guests that I don't think we'd seen before. And I'm sure it was the same in the States and all over the world. It was a great experience. It was a great experience for everybody. Financially, it was rewarding for us as hosts, but it was also personally rewarding when you knew that people really appreciated the decoration, the pictures in your property, the way that you set it up for guests. It was much less of a business transaction than it had become over the years.
Now, when we met about a year ago, you said to me, look, I know Airbnb's my biggest channel and I'm absolutely comfortable with that because, they bring me good guests and it helps power the business. When we met most recently, your view had changed, which is partly why you're here talking to us today. And I mentioned it in our Airbnb episode. So, Steve, when did you start to feel like there was a change in the relationship with Airbnb and with the guests? And when did that start to impact your business enough to make you think you needed to make some changes to your strategy?
Well, I mean, it's been since COVID. When we all know what happened then, Airbnb threw hosts under a bus. So since COVID, the relationship with Airbnb has started to change. We, as hosts, were pretty much thrown under a bus by Airbnb. Non-refundable bookings that should have been covered by guests' travel insurance. They didn't need to go to their travel insurance provider. Airbnb decided to refund all guests regardless of what policy they'd used, because the country was shutting down. Now, I understand they were trying to be very friendly towards guests at that stage. However, by doing that, you left a lot of hosts financially at breaking point. I mean, quite a lot of hosts that were not in the financial position we were in, they went bust as a direct result of a policy that was enforced upon them. It was not in the policies of Airbnb. It was not in the policies in any agreements we'd signed. It was literally, you've got a non-refundable booking that should have been covered by the guest's travel insurance, and hey, we're just going to refund the guest in full, and tough. So yeah, that really did have an impact. It had an impact on hosts throughout the world. I know it was an unusual time, and I think we kind of got over that. Not just us, but I think operators got over that in general and accepted in the end. Okay, as COVID went on, maybe we understand Airbnb's rationale behind it. It still wasn't the right thing to do, but it was maybe an understandable consequence of a pandemic that we hadn't seen in our living memories. So that's where it started. And then it was quiet for 2 or 3 years, and everybody started building their business again. We had a bit of a post-COVID boom. People wanted to get out and experience life again. They wanted to take their masks off and get back to the sea and get back to attractions and, go to the pub and have a beer again. Life started returning to normal and things are pretty good. But the last couple of years, Airbnb have fundamentally started moving that dial towards guests, and it feels like it's almost on a monthly basis now. I think Airbnb are more concerned about their share price than they are about their partners in a supply chain and long-term strategies. It feels like, it's not feels like, it's a fact. The dial has moved massively towards guests and looking after guests and ensuring guests have all of the tools that they're in their armory to be able to argue with hosts, to be able to backlash at hosts through reviews, through refunds. It's an ongoing battle for us, and I'm sure you're going to ask me a lot more questions about that. So I won't take over the whole show just by this one particular question, but the goalposts have been moving, and it's not us that are moving them.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, and it's something that we discussed as well a couple of weeks ago with the addition of hotels to Airbnb's inventory in a really material way. So hotels are not new to Airbnb, but this sort of push. And it seems to us, this is our hypothesis, or at least mine, that a lot of the changes in the policies are really meant to essentially align everything with what guests expect from a traditional hotel. So if you have very different conditions for cancellations and things like that for a hotel as you would for a short-term rental, that ultimately leads to guest confusion. So that's one of our theories. But I'm interested, and you sort of touched on this already, Steve, but I'd love to hear in a little bit more detail how some of these changes have impacted your relationship with the guests and ultimately the way that guests behave compared with 10 years ago, let's say.
I mean, this isn't just 10 years ago, this is 2 years ago. The changes have really impacted. I mean, I'll give you for instance, and I talked about this on LinkedIn 2 or 3 months ago. We had a guest that booked a non-refundable stay about 3 or 4 months before they're due to stay. A week before they were due to travel, they contacted us and said, hey, can we change our 3-night stay to 2 nights because we don't need to be there for 3 nights any longer? And my operations team said, I'm afraid not. You booked a non-refundable stay months ago. We're now a week before you're due to arrive. It's the quietest time of the year for us. We've got no chance of filling in that Sunday night, for instance, with other guests such short notice. So unfortunately, we cannot reduce that stay from 3 nights to 2 nights. The guest argued about it several times with my support team. and we just stuck to the policy. This is Airbnb's policy and our policy. We've all agreed it. You've agreed to it, and you've benefited from a 10% discount by booking a non-refundable stay. Everybody knows where they stand. You just can't come back and ask for flexibility at such short notice. So the guests then proceeded to stay with us, and lo and behold, on day 3 of their stay, they're absolutely fine the first 2 days. Day 3 of their stay, they contacted Airbnb, not us, complained that they had no Wi-Fi, and as they were working from the property, they could no longer stay at the property. They had to leave. And Airbnb, without even coming to us and asking, is there a problem with Wi-Fi at the property? Can you get somebody to resolve it? They refunded the guest for that 3rd night without any intervention from us at all. And just so happens, one of my team were literally around the corner from the property, from the building. So I asked the team member to go in to the door, in case the guest was still at the property, of the apartment within the building, and do a speed test for us on their Wi-Fi. Now, each property have their own unique Wi-Fi. So it's not just the building Wi-Fi, it's actually unique to that individual apartment. We knew that this is the apartment's Wi-Fi. And he did a speed test and he got 70 or 80 meg download. So the speed was absolutely fine to work in, no issue at all. This was 10 minutes after the guest had made this complaint. Luckily, we caught it pretty quickly. We then sent that photograph of the speed test with the metadata on it, and that's the important part. The metadata was there to show that we'd taken this in this location at this time. Airbnb eventually came back to us and paid us back the 3rd night that they shouldn't have taken away from us in the first place, but the guests still got that refund that they the extra night. So at this point, for me, something had changed so dramatically that even with a professional property management company like us that have a decent sized portfolio and have very good relationships at a reasonably high level with Airbnb account managers, that we can reach out to a human and talk to them, not just a call center, and say, this is wrong. We have that kind of support. Most hosts don't have that. They don't have an account manager, so they don't have somebody. They are literally stuck with speaking to the support team that have no understanding of what's going on. So that really was the straw for me that broke the camel's back. And I still have we still have a relationship with their account manager. They still send us emails on market conditions and so on and so forth. But for me, that was the thing that broke the camel's back. This can't continue any longer. So I guess the question would be, I suppose, what have we done about it as a business to change things around? And I'll give you some numbers. So people always like dealing in facts. 2.5 months ago, Airbnb accounted for 35% of our bookings. Our direct bookings were about 20% of our business. We, a semi-urban market, we were very reliant, like a lot of urban markets are, on OTAs bringing us business because they've got the marketing muscle, and it was a two-way conversation. We paid them a commission, significant commission, but a commission to use their marketing muscle and expertise to market to guests, to bring them into their platform to book our properties. But after what happened with Airbnb and the evolution of Airbnb being the dial being much more guest centric, we had to find another way of attracting guests. So we've gone all out for direct bookings. We're happy to deal with OTAs, and most OTAs, in fact, the exclusion of Airbnb, feel like it's a partnership. We pay them a commission. They do their work, they find us guests, and in turn, we then control the guests when the guests stay with us. And they'll intervene if there's a problem and try and negotiate between two parties to try and resolve that problem. Airbnb don't take that way of doing things. So in the last couple of months, we've increased our 20% direct bookings to 60% last week. So all direct booking channels are now worth 60% of our business. But the big loser in that is Airbnb. Airbnb have gone from 35% of our business to 7% last week. So are now becoming a insignificant part of our business, to the point of if we find Airbnb more challenging in the future, it may be a time where we have to stop working with that platform. We're not at that point yet. And we also load Airbnb's rates higher than we do the other OTAs. And that we do that because Airbnb's guests come with substantial risk. Will they cancel the booking in advance? Will they try and do this? Will they leave a terrible review because they're trying to bribe us into giving them a refund for something that was out of our control or insignificant to their stay? These are the challenges that we have, and as a result, we have to load Airbnb's rates significantly more. And again, that happened when Airbnb increased the rates from 15% to 15.5%. So that's, in real world, that's a 3% increase for no benefit to the host at all. So we replied in kind.
It's so interesting, Steve, to hear you talk about it. And Sarah and I talk about these things every week. So I can see Sarah's also eyes lighting up with the reality of the situation on the ground. We're learning so much here. What I find very, very interesting about it is we talked openly about how Airbnb helped build the market in Brighton, right? Like not just from a perspective of being an OTA, but also building the culture around weekend stays and getting out of London. I think we can all put our hand up and say they helped drive that. And now we're in a position where Brighton's biggest property manager has drastically reduced their use of Airbnb. So we're talking about, at the top, you talked about shareholders and them trying to please shareholders. Well, that's definitely not going to please shareholders. And then secondly, we talked about how your relationship with other OTAs is better, which again is absolutely capitalism 101, which is if there's a customer not being served properly, go and serve them better and go and win that business and go and win that relationship. So I think that is also absolutely fascinating from the perspective of, well, Airbnb feels like it needs to be guest centric. That's what we're hearing from you. But, be careful because you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you, right? Because, there you are, Steve. My thought, though, would be, are there like individual hosts? Because, the Brighton market is, majority is individual hosts, right? As we talk about all the time. That is the industry. Do we feel like that segment, what's your sense, Steve? Do you feel that segment is going to be turning away from Airbnb with these policies? Or are they just going to lump it, take it because they don't have the data that you have your hands on?
Probably yes at the moment to both of them questions. Are individual hosts going to move away from Airbnb right now? No, probably not. Do they have the tools that we have? Of course they don't have the tools we have at our disposal, the data, the dynamic pricing, the understanding of the local market, how to interpret that data. Individual hosts just don't have the time or the knowledge to be able to do that. And I think Airbnb are kind of reliant on that. However, the game changer is coming along is Airbnb now bringing hotels on a big way and changing the way they price. If recently Airbnb in the last few months have changed changed our cleaning fees, so we can't show cleaning fees as a separate line any longer so that's lumped into the total cost of the stay. Now that's done to have parity with hotels. Make no bones about that. But you can't, at a hotel, you can have a cleaner working in a hotel cleaning 25 rooms and be on the call the whole time. You can't do that in a 2-bedroom apartment when it's a mile away from the nearest 2-bedroom apartment. That's just not feasible or possible, which is why a lot of short-term rentals don't do one-night stays. Because they want to aggregate that cleaning fee over 2 or 3 nights so the guest doesn't feel like it's super expensive. If you're staying in a short-term rental for one night and you're having to pay a cleaning fee, actually that cost is usually going to be more expensive than a hotel. Where we come into our own is over 2, 3, 4, 5 nights, and that cost is aggregated, and all of a sudden it turns out to be, first of all, more cost efficient, and actually you're getting a home from home. I think I think Airbnb are changing and moving the goalposts so far from where they originally started. And I, for one, that was a big advocate of how Airbnb operate and understanding the relationship we had as a partnership. That has now changed. We are now part of their supply chain. We are no longer a partner, and that's the fact. That's what we're seeing on the ground. And I'm sure it's not just me as a professional host seeing that. That's right around the world.
Can I ask you, Steve, on the back of that, how do you feel respective to the other OTAs that you are still working with? And do you see the same kind of shifts coming down the pipeline from them? And therefore, 60% direct bookings is incredible. So curious what the take is on the other OTAs and if you're feeling some of the same squeeze?
No. It's a simple answer. The relationship with all of the other OTAs, not just one or two, all of them, hasn't really changed in 10 years. It's remained consistent. It's felt like a partnership, as it used to with Airbnb. And that partnership is the same as it always was. Some of the bigger OTAs I could mention, but probably for context, I'm sure you guys know who they are. Nothing has changed. The T's and C's haven't been updated for years. If there's been any, their fraud protection measures have improved over the years, which has meant Actually, we trust them even more than we used to. So I have no interest in not working with OTAs. I'm happy with that relationship, but don't keep moving the goalposts on us, because we'll have to react, and that's what we've done. We've had to react. We've had to respond to a challenging market. I mean, just some of them things, the increased fee I mentioned, but more frequent and rapid policy change in the last 2 years than all the other OTAs put together, which is quite difficult to keep up with when you're going to fall foul of their policies, not in allowing us to have ownership of the guests once the guest has booked with Airbnb, allowing guests to threaten leaving negative reviews if they don't get refunds for certain parts of their stays. I mean, this is nonsense. I heard recently, I was at Scale UK, which is a conference in Manchester in England, and I heard on stage from one other professional property management company that the guests had taken a photograph of one of the sheets after they've checked out, and put bloodstains on it using ChatGPT. So ask ChatGPT to put bloodstains on this sheet. They then downloaded that image, shared it with Airbnb customer support or guest support, and Airbnb refunded the entire stay, even though the host proved this is right now. Here's the metadata. These are the kind of things that are happening. It's almost Airbnb are encouraging guests to game the system. It's no longer fair. So we have to, as I said earlier, we have to increase our loading factor, so the amount we load Airbnb's rates by, to account for that additional risk that they've now created.
Steve, it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating to hear these stories. You've got to come back and talk to us again, my friend, and I'm sure you will, because we'll just keep twisting your arm, or we'll just send you calendar invites and hope that you turn up. We always like to give actionable insights as well. Just what can scaling, growing property managers or direct hosts do, quite frankly, to get started on their direct booking journey, to lessen their dependence on probably their primary OTA, which is Airbnb?
I mean, well, first thing they need to do is find a property management software to be able to manage more than one channel at the same time. So you need to get your software stack in line. It isn't that expensive. There's a lot of very cost-effective property management systems out there. Just type in property management system into Google or your preferred browser, and you'll find that you'll be able to connect to more than one channel straight away. That's your easiest route to it. And the second thing is marketing. You need to talk about yourself. You need to talk about your business, what makes you unique. You need to have a web presence for sure. And that doesn't need to be an expensive, all singing, all dancing website. You need a brochure site that you can almost do yourself now with no-code tools like Lovable, for instance. Get your brand out there. Let people see who you are, and try and find a way of getting maybe a Shopify plug into your website so that you can. These are things you can do cheaply. We don't do it like that because we're obviously quite a large company, but these are easy enough plugins to plug into a website, and you can have a model where guests can check out on your direct site straight away. And then once you've done that, you need to market it. And if that's through paid advertising through Google or Meta, go ahead and do that. These tools are super intuitive now. A lot of these campaigns can be done quite cheaply, and what it does is it gets you higher up the Google and other rankings, of course, as well, very quickly. It's not rocket science. The data and information is all out there on YouTube for you to set these things up pretty quickly, even if you don't have a lot of experience with technology. So that would be my diversify your portfolio, diversify the OTAs you're dealing with, I think is key to it. Even if you don't want to do direct bookings, diversify where people can book and who they can book with, because if one of them start playing the games that we've seen recently, you can do something about that.
I have $1 million question before you let you go, Steve. Is there a way for Airbnb to repair the trust that it sounds like has been broken with operators, especially from some of the stories you've been telling me, in your case in particular? And if so, how can that be rebuilt?
Well, the first thing I would suggest if I was Airbnb is start attending conferences. Just don't come to conferences in the UK. They might do in the States, but they certainly don't over here. Start being visible. Start being a visible presence so you can listen to your property managers on what the problems are. Don't just make policies in a boardroom that affect your whole ecosystem and expect no backlash from that. That would be my first and foremost advice to any company. We are not just part of the supply chain. We are your supply chain. Airbnb doesn't exist without companies like me and without individual hosts. they don't.
Steve, that's a brilliant place to leave it, my friend. Thank you for coming in again. Sarah, Steve and I were having coffee last week with Damien because we're excited Damien's looking at venues in Brighton. So next June, guys, we're going to be in Steve's city. I'm not going to call it my city because I'm still new to town. It's definitely Steve's city, not mine. But so we'll be heavily involved in that. So yeah, that's very exciting, isn't it?
Look forward to hosting the world in Brighton next summer, June the 10th. So it should be a fun time. Let's go UK.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve.
Cheers. Cheers, guys.
Always good to hear from Steve, isn't it? What a guy, eh?
Man, yeah, I love his candor and the way that he's able to give anecdotes. I think I oftentimes find that with some operators, it's this is my problem. But the real world examples of no, this specific incident happened to me really brings color to the events and to what his perspective is and what he's been experiencing. I guess for me, it was also sort of surprising. You and I talk about, oh, Airbnb's made this change, they've made this change, they've made that change. I never really thought about the fact that because they are so guest centric, that sounds great, right? You hear Airbnb is guest centric, and you're like, wonderful. That sounds fabulous. Who doesn't, customers always right kind of thing. But to hear the flip side of the coin, and in particular how it's impacting operators, and we were chatting with Steve, all I could think was, man, he's absolutely right. He does this professionally. He has a team. He has a way to fight back. He knows what's status quo and what's not. But if you're an individual host, and a lot of your bookings come from Airbnb, or nearly all of your bookings come from Airbnb, it's a scary place to be in because you don't have control.
Agree. I thought that was interesting. Also, Steve's such a logical thinker that it's like problem, what's the solution? And he's very, very, very good at keeping laser focused on what the problem is. So he's not getting himself het up about different things here at all. He's saying, look, I think there's a change in relationship. I think the guests are starting to act in a certain way. And if I feel like it's not a partnership anymore, so what am I going to do about it? Cool, here are my actions. And so that's a really interesting person to talk to about what the solutions are. The bit that stood out for me, you'll know what I'm going to say here because you could see my eyes lighting up, was how different the relationship is with different OTAs versus Airbnb. And again, it's a reminder to all of us that not to lump OTAs into one bucket because it's just simply not the case, especially if you're providing a very good service, which is providing a booking to a supplier and then having a neutral or a good, let's be ambitious, a good relationship with your supplier, then the whole ecosystem can work. I think that's very interesting. And obviously we'll be interviewing booking.com in the new year. So we're going to hear from them directly, kind of their view on the short-term rental industry as well in the lead up to the Short Stay Summit. So I thought that was timely to hear about how he's actively feeling differently about different booking channels, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I appreciated as well the advice that he had for Airbnb, because if you're Airbnb, you're listening to this, how do you fix it? I think he was pretty clear. I think it's not necessarily, he's mentioned conferences because for him, that's a great way to kind of meet and greet. But I think the real message is to speak with hosts, to speak with operators, to really get the boots on the ground perspective and make sure that is taken into account when these decisions are being made, especially that are sort of sweeping changes that impact people's bottom line and sometimes their livelihood.
Well, look, that was incredibly interesting. We'll be doing more of that next year. Look, we have come to the end of the calendar year, it feels. It feels like the end of term, but you'll be hearing more from Sarah and myself over the Christmas period because we have some pre-recorded episodes from Scale France, which will be going out over the Christmas period. So if you're bored of eating turkey and opening presents and singing Christmas carols or whatever you choose to do during the period, you can still get your Leo and Sarah the check-in fix. Sarah, here we are, the end of the year, buddy, back recording together. Doesn't it feel lovely?
It feels like it's just meant to be. I'm loving it.
There you go. That was all I ever wanted for Christmas, Sarah. So I got my wish. And I think it makes my family happy because it gets me out of the way for a while I record with you. So everyone's winning, aren't they, really? Everyone's winning.
I can't wait to start the new year with you, Leo. It's going to be great.
I know. I've got to ask you, come on. Everyone knows I'm at home with the family this year. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in the Sarah Nanda pre-Christmas world.
Yeah. So my in-laws arrive on Wednesday and we are taking them down to the south of Spain, to Andalusia. And when they first get here, the night they get here, we're going to decorate the Christmas tree because in Uruguay, it's the opposite hemisphere. So it's always hot. It's summer there right now. And so they've never had a proper pine needle Christmas tree and they're really excited. So we bought a real tree and we're going to decorate the tree together before we go on holiday and really hope it doesn't die. So it should be really good. I'm excited to have them here. And it'll be great as well because my partner's not used to being able to spend Christmas with his family because they're so far and it's few and far between that this happens. So I'm really pleased.
Love that. We were decorating our Christmas tree last night, ready for the big day. And Sadie, our daughter, our 4-year-old daughter I talk about all the time, was just loving it, just absolutely loving it, putting all the presents up, put all the decorations up. And I was like, look, is it ready for the star yet? And she said, no, we need more on the tree before we put the star on. And Jasmine and I was sort of talking about it. She was the most excited of anyone. It really does bring Christmas back to life when you have these little people running around getting so excited about it. So we gave her the honor of putting the star on the tree this year. So with a little bit of help from her mum, she got to put the star on the top of the tree.
Wow, that's incredible. What is your Christmas tradition? My mom would always, we knew it was time to decorate the Christmas tree. She would put on a Mannaheim steamroller tape, not even CD. It was like one of those, I don't even know what they're, a cassette tape. And we had this disgusting player it was huge in the living room. Anyway, when Mannaheim Steamroller comes out, it's time to decorate the Christmas tree and you better be involved.
We're quite standard as well, right? Christmas music on, mixture of carols and the more modern poppy stuff, mince pies, chocolates. It's the time of year where people start delivering chocolates, isn't it? So your cupboard just gets full of naughty things. Just lean in, just indulge, right? And then we'll keep it very simple over the time period. We talk more about the food than we talk about the presents. Always have done. So it'll be like, what are we eating when? What are we drinking when? That'll be us. But yeah, very much looking forward to it. Well, look, guys, thanks for joining us again this year as we've got back together, Sarah and I, as the check-in. We've loved it, as you can tell. If you've enjoyed today's show, please hit like, share, subscribe in all the usual places. Have a wonderful Christmas, and we'll see you again in the new year.